from officers need to be noted? No, I believe everyone's present and correct. Item 3 then, declarations of interest. Justine.
Thank you, Leader. The only advice I have, if an interest arises during debate, then please declare it at that stage. Thank you very much.
Anything to raise here, members? Okay, if we move on to confirmation of Cabinet minutes from the 3rd of October then. Is everyone happy that they're all correct? Any issues arising from those? No, if not, then updates on actions. There are no outstanding actions. Anything to note here? No. Okay, we can move swiftly on to item number 6 then, which is the prior information notice responses. And if I hand over initially to Jo on this.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So the master plan for the British site was approved in Cabinet in 2018 following purchase of the site in 2016. The Phase 1 works are currently in the technical design phase to address the highest priority hazards and develop a surface watercourse. In August this year, officers issued a prior information notice inviting prospective partners to submit expressions of interest, setting out how their proposals would bring forward the master plan ambitions. The PIN notice ensures that the Council meets its legal requirements to consider best value in any land deal or partnership. 3 expressions of interest were received, with EOI 3 submitting a comprehensive proposal for the development of the whole site via a joint community interest company with the Council. This proposal is best aligned to the Council's strategic ambition for the site. If approved today, then officers will continue to engage with the local community to ensure residents are fully informed and engaged in the way forward. And they will also work with EOI 3 to draw up a licence agreement, granting rights to undertake feasibility works and make arrangements for them to engage with the local community on their proposals too. I'll hand over to Dave Leach to provide more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. So just some important points to draw out here in terms of the background to this report. As Councillor Gordon's mentioned, there was a lot of work undertaken back in 2017-2018 to define a master plan for the site, not in the context of a traditional planning master plan, but as something that was developed with the community to look at what the opportunity areas were for us to explore in further detail. Our focus since then has very much been on moving the Phase 1 works forward. Members will be aware there's activity taking place at the minute through the geotechnical work on the site to move those works forward as quickly as we can. But what we didn't want to lose sight of was the wider opportunities that initial clean and green activity delivered, particularly, as I say, in the context of this wider clean and green master plan that we developed. And there were 10 opportunity areas identified through our community engagement activity at that point in time. Things like a gateway to the British, things like landscape corridors, things like community food growing, and things like sustainable energy generation. There was a real appetite as well to bring forward some of the heritage activity, particularly renovating some of the listed buildings and scheduled ancient monuments on the site. And that's continued to be the driver for us in terms of where the long-term aspirations for the British go. So as part of preparing to deliver the wider master plan, we've issued what's called a prior information notice, which essentially just invites ideas at this stage, ideas for people to come forward to talk us through how they would help us to deliver against those master plan components. We had 3 submissions. Some of those submissions, in fact 2 of the 3, were very focused on one element and didn't really give us the ability to deliver that wider master plan that had been put in place, whereas EOI 3 did. Now, the level of detail in terms of exactly what components will be delivered will need to be worked through. As I say, this is very much an expression of interest at this stage and the significant community engagement activity to move forward with this. So at this stage, the request for members is to consider entering into heads of terms with this company to look at how we move towards a joint venture arrangement. We would have significant work to do as officers to undertake due diligence on that joint venture arrangement. We would need to make sure that the risks to the council are appropriately managed and that the financial liabilities don't sit with the council as a result of that. And as I say, it's critical throughout that process that we do continue to do the community engagement. At the end of that, that joint venture heads of terms discussion, there will be a decision to take again as to whether we move forward on the terms that have been agreed at that point. One final point to note, which does link into the recommendations, is that we would require, as I say, a team to come forward, a team of appropriate advisors to undertake that due diligence and to undertake the negotiations on what that joint venture structure might look like. We need to put something to market, essentially, to ascertain final costs for that. So we'd be looking to bring back a report into the executive member resources once we have a cost estimate for what those works will cost.
Okay, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Dave. Any questions or comments on the report? One question around, you talk about the community engagement. That's something that will be continued through every stage of this, just so that we make sure that everything continues to sort of align with the opportunity areas and the master plan as the community are aware of.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical for us with this project. Community engagement will go on all the way through this. The company who've approached us, and it's a social enterprise company, it's not a private entity. They are very, very committed to the process of community engagement, and that's one of the reasons that they haven't wanted to specify exactly what activity they would want to see on the site, because ultimately that will come down to those discussions with the community about how we best jointly deliver that master plan. So that's not something that I see as a negative that they haven't specified that. That gives plenty of scope for the community to define that. What I will say at this point is that there are always risks with a project like this, that it won't proceed past that heads of terms area. It's the process of going through that heads of terms discussion is so that we can really understand whether we can reach an agreement on that joint venture. So I do want members to be aware that it may be that we come back and say that we're not in a position to move it forward. But at this stage, we're ready to start those discussions.
Okay, thanks. That's a good reassurance. Any other questions before we move to the recommendations? The recommendations are at paragraph 8.1 then. It's recommended that Cabinet firstly authorises officers to draw up a licence agreement with EOI 3, granting them rights to undertake feasibility work on the land at the British, subject to no cost liability to the Council. Secondly, that we authorise officers to work towards a head of terms for joint venture arrangements with EOI 3, starting with a memorandum of understanding setting out how we will develop this in parallel with the feasibility stage. And thirdly, that we note that further external due diligence on the financial and legal liabilities of a joint venture arrangement will be required, and that a future funding request will be submitted to the executive member resources once external support costs have been established. Are we all in agreement with those recommendations? Show of hands. Yeah, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Dave. If we move then to agenda item 7, which is the Blenavon and Pontypool placemaking plans, and hand over to Joe Gordon.
Thank you, Leader. So later in the meeting today, I'll be asking Cabinet to recommend a new economy and skills strategy for Council to adopt. When we speak on that item, I will set out how we will help our businesses to prosper and help our residents to gain the skills they need for the workplace. But importantly, the strategy also sets out our aspirations on place. How do we make sure that our places, by which I mean our canal, our cleaning, greening at the British, our World Heritage Site, and of course our town centres, are thriving hubs of activity whilst being resilient to economic turbulence? We have a master plan in place for the British, and members have heard this morning about exciting proposals linked to that plan. I also intend to bring plans for the canal to Cabinet early next year. This report sets out 2 of our town centre placemaking plans for Pontypool and Blenavon town centres. Our plan for Cwmbran town centre will follow early next year as we are working jointly with the new owners on this. For Blenavon, we will seek investment that helps the town to meet the everyday needs of its local community. We have to recognise the way people buy products and use services has fundamentally changed, and the town cannot rely solely on retail. To support our local retailers, we have to look at encouraging investment in food and drink, leisure and other basic day-to-day services that will draw people into the town. We will also seek investment that builds upon the town's unique World Heritage status to attract visitors and to encourage them to stay overnight in the town. For Pontypool, we will seek investment that builds on the town's traditional market town reputation for independent businesses and innovative startups. We will also seek investment in the leisure and evening economy, bringing new food and drink businesses into the town centre and supporting youth provision. Cabinet will be aware that we've already invested in our town centre through our own COVID recovery fund, and that we've also submitted a substantial funding request for exciting projects in both towns to the UK Government's Levelling Up Fund. We hope to have a decision on this autumn. Whilst the main purpose of these placemaking plans is to guide our bids for capital investment, we are aware that the plans must also set out how we intend to work closer with our communities on some of the key social and environmental issues, including youth engagement, cleanliness, event programmes and more. I'll now pass over to Dave, who can talk through the detailed projects and the consultation feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Yeah, there's a few reports that you may be hearing a bit from me today, members. So, in terms of the placemaking plans for Blanavon and Pontypool, as Councillor Gordon said, Cwmbran will follow soon. The reason that you're not seeing Cwmbran today is that we're doing a lot of work with the new owners of the town centre, and we thought it was critical that we made sure that those new owners' aspirations were part of the plan. There's no sense in us having a council-focused plan that doesn't incorporate how we can work effectively with such a large stakeholder. So those plans will come forward soon. The reason that we've brought Blanavon and Pontypool forward to you sooner than that is that these documents are very much a prerequisite to securing funding from key funding partners, and that includes Welsh Government as well as UK Government. So we're very keen to make sure that there is a framework in place to allow us to secure that funding as soon as possible. In terms of the documents themselves, members will see in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 the two placemaking plans that we're asking to be adopted. Those plans, if I move on to the Blanavon plan just briefly, Councillor Gordon has very clearly set out the vision there that we're trying to achieve with that plan. What the plan does is breaks the town of Percentage into a series of intervention areas that we will focus activity and focus our requests for investment. And those intervention areas have been determined based on the specific needs within the town. So whether that be an area that needs investment to improve its look, whether it be an area that has a particular challenge, a particular problem, perhaps from vacant properties, or whether it be something that's cross-cutting across the whole of the areas, such as youth engagement, or such as the way that we work with communities to maintain the spaces. So the placemaking plan very much draws all of these different components together. It is a capital investment plan, and it is designed for us to be able to steer that investment on the capital side. But what we're really, really keen in designing this plan up is that capital investment is achieving something with our communities, so that it's very much focused and aligned to the community's approach that we're looking to take when we work with our communities to tackle some of these problems and these challenges. We put the first draft of the plans out to public consultation quite early, and we had quite extensive engagement from members of the public on that, which was really, really helpful in terms of shaping the direction of travel, and the plans have changed substantially since then. Some of the key concerns that came across were concerns regarding the low level of footfall and the poor commercial retail offer in some parts of our town centres. And one of the things we're really keen to point out here is that attracting footfall is about having that diverse and modern offer. It's that mix of activities that draw people into the town centre, so that once they're there and once they're dwelling within that town centre, they're then more likely to pop into the shops and pop into the traditional retail. So it's very much about having a mix that draws people in, and having people there and in the town centre will give our retailers that footfall that they need. In delivering the plan, of course, we've recognised that it's really important that we include projects which are going to drive that footfall into the town centre, and some of the ones that Councillor Gordon referred to in the Levelling Up Fund bid do exactly that. They're projects that are designed to pull people into both of our town centres. We're working really closely with Welsh Government in terms of the remediation of properties, working really closely with Welsh Government on grant schemes such as their placemaking grants. Again, this document is a prerequisite for drawing that funding down. And that's about us investing with the private sector and bringing vacant properties back into use with a designated end use. And some of that activity has already happened over the past couple of years. And we have a programme in place now of about £700,000 pounds worth of potential grant to continue that investment and that activity. The one other area I wanted to draw attention to is around youth engagement, and that's certainly something that came back strongly in the consultation and engagement feedback. And some of the projects that members will see in the plan are very much focused about how we create some activity for young people in our town centres. Some of the activity around a cultural hub, around leisure activities within the town are very, very focused on young people. And we'll continue as we start to work through the action plan of this to engage with young people about how we design those facilities out. The only other one for me to draw to members' attention in terms of this was there was a lot of engagement around public toilets in the context of the Pontypool plan and in the context of the levelling up fund bid. And I think it's fair to say a concern that the toilets would be lost at Hanbury Road. That's certainly not the intention here. The project that's been put forward in terms of its design stage includes that toilet provision. So that is still included within the project that's been put forward, and that's separate access into that toilet facility for that cafe facility. So it's not a removal of public toilet provision, and that's something that came back quite strongly during the consultation. So the documents now are in a position where that consultation feedback has been incorporated. We're optimistic and hopeful that these are now very strong documents and something we can use to try and lever in further investment.
Great, thank you both. Any questions? Peter?
Just quickly, I fully support this plan and I'm grateful for my Cabinet colleague and the officer for the information they gave. I was particularly pleased that they both mentioned that Cwmbran isn't being forgotten. It's coming forward next year. I understand the reasons why, that there's been a change of ownership, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the plans regarding Cwmbran next year. Thank you.
That's very welcome. It's a good point, isn't it? We need to think about the area as a whole. It's not that our towns compete with each other, that we need to take them forward all as one. So I've got Richard, then Mandy.
I fully support the proposals. I think it's very good as well, the consultation, that you've actually addressed that in the report, because councils generally are criticised that you do consultation, but you've got your old plans sewn up, etc. So the way you actually outlined it and said, well, this is right, the myth about the public toilets is a clear example of that. And the focusing on the youth in particular, because that came up several times. I welcome the news about Cwmbran, but I really think Pontypool and Blenavon need that kickstart because they are separate. They've got their own unique selling points, the market town and the heritage town, etc. And I just look forward to these coming to fruition and the money being invested in there and the ongoing success that this could bring to those communities. So I fully endorse it, and thank you and Joe for bringing it to us today.
Yeah, a lot similar to what Richard just said, really. I fully support the plan as well. I'm pleased that the consultation has been taken place. I think it's really important to listen to the views of the public, especially when you look at all the themes that have emerged, public toilets, provision of parking, youth provision and cleanliness. I also echo, I think that there needs to be a lot of partnership working between the council and the community, so I think we've all got a responsibility there.
No, I very much welcome that sort of interlinked approach. I think we need to treat this as a sort of one turbine approach. It's not just our town centres, but we spoke the last meeting about the farm, our World Heritage site, the canal, the British that we talked about earlier. I think all these things can come together to make our sort of offer interlinked, and I think that's important because in the past it's there's been too much sort of different places and different projects competing with one another, whereas we can all sort of pull together behind these ones. On town centres in the future, I think it's interesting to look at the public consultation. It's good to see that public consultation has been done, because there are often a lot of misconceptions around what we can and can't do with regards to our town centres. Very often there's sort of negative commentary around town centres, but all town centres are facing the same challenges across Britain, not just in Torvine. There's a lot that we can do, but what we can't do is demand retailers come to vacant units, especially when we don't own those vacant units. And the other thing, I guess, is an appeal people to visit the town centres and to treat them with respect when they are there. It's interesting that the points about cleanliness and empty units coming up in Pontypool, similar themes in Blenavon about cleanliness again and how we link the visitor attractions with the town. So anything we can do on those. I've really welcomed the murals that have gone up in Pontypool, for example, because I just think they bring the place to life a little bit, and especially if they've got sort of themes around our history and our heritage as a town. Agree with Joe's point, but just maybe what we can do to expand on that, perhaps, about town centres not just being about retail anymore, how we connect retail, leisure, culture, commerce, public services and residential to get more life into our town centres. I'm really keen to bring as many public service organisations to our town centres in Pontypool and Glenavon to get that footfall within the town as well. You can make the same argument, I guess, with residential. One question about engaging with young people. It's often a bit of a catch-all phrase, isn't it, about things to do for young people. How do we get from that desire to specific proposals and specific things that are possible for us to do? I'm sure there'd be lots of things we want to do if we had infinite money and resources. But how do we sort of translate that general feeling that we want to offer more for our young people to do into specific proposals? And just lastly, just to welcome the reassurance on public toilet provision, because I know that's an issue that causes some concern. So yeah, questions about young people and how we try and develop sort of specific things in and around our town centres for them, and a focus on what we can do and a recognition of we can't offer sort of false choices to people and things that are impossible promises, but what we can do is work to try and give our town centres a chance.
Yes, I completely agree on the point around young people's engagement. And what we've tried to do here is engage specifically with young people, not only in the design of the plan itself, but also in the selection of some of the projects to prioritise and what activities to start moving forward. And on an ongoing basis now, we want to continue to engage with those young people to design up those facilities themselves so that young people actually are taking control and ownership of some of the activities that they want to do in the town centre. We're working really closely with the Community Council and are keen to work even closer with the Community Council in Pontypool around some of the young people's activity, because I think this is where partnership can really come together. The Community Council have invested heavily in supporting young people with a young people's officer. We are looking at the capital investment side, and we're looking at how we join those two things together. So we've got young people's engagement, the youth support activity, our own youth support activity, and the capital investment. And the idea is to pull all of that together so that it doesn't just become a platitude around, yes, we will engage with young people, but there's some meaningful action that comes off the back of it.
That's great. The linking of the park and the town in Pontypool is a particular opportunity there, I think, because obviously for younger young people, we're taking forward the inclusive play expansion there, and that's a great thing. But for older ones, there's a potential of the area that's currently got the skate park on it. If that could be updated, I think that's something that would be great. Yes, it's how we sort of try and channel that offer for young people, so that there is something to draw them into the town centre and to give them things to do. Okay, any other questions, members? If not, are we happy to move to the recommendations at 8.1 of the report, that we approve both the Pontypool and Blenavon placemaking plans, and I'm sure that's something we'll continue to consult with wider stakeholders and residents on as we take them forward. Everyone in agreement? Great, that's carried. If we move then to agenda item 8, which is the economy and skills strategy, and if I hand over to Joe.
Okay, thank you again. So this report is timely, actually, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to present it to members today. Last week, we saw how quickly the global and national economic situation can change and how this has a real tangible impact on the lives of our residents and prospects for our businesses. Our residents and our businesses are understandably worried about the impact of inflation on the cost of living and the impact of rising interest rates on the cost of borrowing. We know, of course, that these national economic headwinds will unfortunately impact on the economy of Torfaen, and we know that many of the levers that can affect these headwinds are beyond our control and sit with UK government. But with this turbulent national picture, I think it's more important than ever that we spell out what type of economy we want to see in Torfaen. This is what the Economy and Skills Strategy aims to do. We've worked extensively with our economic forums and with the Prosperous Scrutiny Committee to explore what a successful Torfaen economy looks like. I thank everybody who's helped us on this journey, as their views have significantly shaped the strategy. I hope that the end project is something that we can deliver together. Together, we have determined that a successful and sustainable Torfaen economy is a well-balanced Torfaen economy, a borough whose businesses are delivering economic growth while helping to create thriving, safe and attractive places for shopping, trade and leisure, and supporting our citizens into skilled and secure employment. We are fortunate in Torfaen that we have a diverse mix of businesses, each with their own economic ambitions and outlook. Some are at the cutting edge of innovation, international trade and high-skilled employment. This is the competitive innovation economy. Others are providing crucial supplies and services that our residents and businesses rely on in their daily lives and are doing so locally and therefore helping to reduce the impact on climate change. This is our resilient everyday economy. Both parts of the economy are crucial to delivering the sustainable economic outcomes that we want to see in our borough. Both will be supported by the strategy. I'll now hand over to Dave to talk through the detail and explain more about how we can work with our partners to influence the type of economy we want to see in Torfaen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. This strategy, members will be aware, has been in development for some time. We started the development of this prior to, or immediately prior to, the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the pandemic gave us that opportunity to pause and reflect on some of the changes that were being drawn through there. And it really gave us that opportunity to focus in on this question of what is the type of economy that we want to see in Torfaen, and what do we see as the role of the economy in Torfaen? What impact should the economy be having on the well-being and the lives of the people who live and work in the borough, and on the opportunities that gives to businesses to drive forward economic activity? So that extended period that we've had to develop this has really helped in shaping some of that. And what the strategy does is it sets out some of those impacts that we would like to see in terms of the state of the economy. We know, as Councillor Gordon has said, that we don't control all of the levers for some of this activity, and we know that as a result of that, there will be some parts of those indicators that are well beyond our control to influence. But what it does do is it shapes that view as to where we want the economy to go in Torfaen. And in terms of the basis for that strategic vision, it's focused very much around people. That's things like employment numbers, economic inactivity, commuting activity, and our skills activity. Place, which is how our areas are connected. It's a lot of the other items that we've been talking on today's agenda, actually, the British, the canal, our town centres, and further. And business, how do we increase the number of businesses that we have in the borough and increase the growth rates within those businesses, help those businesses to survive for longer? And the impact's very much shaped around those three core themes. And off the back of that, we've established 8 specific objectives, 4 of which relate to the support for that competitive, innovation-driven component of the economy, and 4 of which relate specifically to building and sustaining that resilient everyday part of the economy. And the first 4, as members will see in 4.2.1, are around economic output, around supporting our businesses to engage in regional supply chains, and that's an area for us to work with colleagues across the city region and within the city deal team. Creating high-skilled employment opportunities for our residents, and that's very specifically focused around those high-skilled employment opportunities. And importantly, and this is something that came up time and time again in our engagement, encouraging business innovation that aligns to those public priorities. There are huge growth opportunities in areas that deliver a public good. We've seen it through COVID with healthcare. We've seen it through some of the support we've had from Welsh Government around manufacturing productivity, and the similar opportunities around climate change products. So finding ways to incentivise activity that links into those public priorities. And on the everyday economy side, it's around creating and sustaining that secure employment for our residents. We know when we engage that being in employment is very, very valuable, and it's something that we're really keen to drive forward as a priority within the strategy. But being mindful that we're also looking to be socially inclusive and supporting vulnerable groups into employment. And there's a lot of activity set out within the strategy as to how we'll specifically support vulnerable groups. Creating resilient, safe and attractive places, we've talked about a lot today. And also recognising the role of wellbeing advice and guidance in encouraging social inclusion, so that that wider support network that exists around the economy is in place. And each of those objectives has its own targets and has its own component within the action plan. There is an action plan in detail that sits behind this. The officers are starting to work through how we deliver that now, and that action plan has very specific activities for us to be tracked and monitored on. And as part of the monitoring and governance regime for this, we will be bringing an annual monitoring report into the executive member, and we'll also be taking that report through the Torfaen Strategic Economic Forum. And that report will essentially be asking them, have we done what we said we were going to do, but is what we said we were going to do having the desired impact as well? So it will cover off both of those components within that. And that gives us the flexibility and the ability to adjust if the interventions that we're putting forward aren't quite right for the particular economic part of the economic cycle that we're in. In terms of consultation and engagement, as Councillor Gordon said, we've engaged heavily on this document. There was an extensive public consultation where we had about 60 to 70 responses, large numbers agreeing with the proposed vision that we put forward and with the objectives. And it was, I think, almost unanimous in terms of the activities that we've been put forward to deliver those objectives. So that action plan, as I say, will be monitored as we go throughout the year and reported into the executive member. And the question today is around the adoption of that economy and skills strategy, or the recommendation rather to council to adopt that strategy.
Thank you both. Any questions on this? I just want to thank officers for the report, really. It's good to see the mention of work with both Welsh Government, UK Government and CCR, and making sure that everything that we do is interlinked and the things are done at the right level to be a good combined effort. Very much welcome the chart on page 155. I think it is about the objectives. I think there's a good balance there between achieving GVA growth, but also about it being far more than that. It's about inclusive growth. It's about making sure that all parts of our borough are taken forward and not just GVA increase and forget the rest of it. I think that's very good to have that balance. As well as thanking officers for the report, I'd just like to take this opportunity as well to thank businesses across Torfaen for their hard work. One of the best parts of my job, and I know Joe's job as well, is that we get to visit some fantastic local businesses. They're grounded across Torfaen. Many of them are renowned at what they do, including many of them renowned at what they do globally, and have got reputations for being great at what they do. They might not shout about themselves as much as perhaps some larger businesses do, but they employ people. They're good employers, and they're great at what they do. I was going to start a list of different firms I visited recently who've struck me particularly, but I know I'll miss someone out, so I won't do that. But just to say thank you, because I know, being in business isn't easy. It's difficult, especially at the moment with costs and supply issues facing those businesses. But our local economy is the sum total of their efforts. So I just wanted to thank them as part of this report. Any other comments, colleagues? The recommendations are at paragraph 8.1. It's recommended that Cabinet consider approval and approve the presentation of the Economy and Skills Strategy to Council for adoption at its meeting on September the 20th. Is that agreed? That's carried? Great. Thank you very much. Right, on to agenda item 9 then. It's Pearl House redevelopment.
That's me, Leader. Thank you. So I'm really pleased that we're bringing this forward. This has been hard fought for, and I should name check Leslie Groves and Simon Rose, who isn't currently with us at the moment, but for bringing this forward, because it's been long in the making, really. It's essentially just across the road from the Civic Centre, Pearl House, where we used to situate our educational team. And it's lain dormant since, because we had a rationalisation of our where our services were situated. So it's been a dormant building, which we obviously don't want in Pontypool, as we've discussed in the previous items. It's for 16 units of single person accommodation, which overwhelmingly we've been needing. Over the course of the pandemic, we were finding that the vast majority of homeless individuals who were presenting were single persons, so we are incredibly stretched in that area. I've made repeated reference to the housing and homelessness situation, which remains dire, so this is a very welcome bit of good news in the middle of all of that. It'll deliver 16 units, 4 of which will be for quick temporary accommodation. The rest will be supported accommodation, and this is support 24 hours a day, which we believe will lead to a more sustainable service, essentially. So what we've found with some individuals is it varies from person to person what it takes to get back on your feet. This is designed to help people get back on their feet in a sustainable way, so that they can move on then and move into a more and that they can sustain the tenancy that they move on into. So it's a model that we've not previously done in Torvine before, but it's a move in the right direction, and it's a move towards a more sustainable way of helping our homeless individuals in the borough. So I'm really pleased on it. We've got several support services who will be based on site. We also have several support services who are also based in the town centre anyway. And so it'll be a total wraparound service. So I'm so confident that this is the right way to go with everything. The capital costs will be supported by Welsh Government, their Homeless Phase 2 funding, which is 1.7 million, with the rest coming from Melin, which is 431,331. It's another example of good partnership working with RSLs. You know, I think it's important to highlight that because they are an important partner in delivering our ambitions when it comes to housing and homelessness. Housing management will be met through rental cost for the provision, and will be minimal anyway. If one of the services below was to vacate, which is unlikely, you know, we'll be able to pick that cost up anyway. So there's 2 recommendations there. Cabinet approves the redevelopment of Pearl Assurance House into an accommodation and support hub, and the second is Cabinet approves the progression of a procurement process to support the development of this project. So it was a little bit rambling, but hopefully that's touched on all the important points.
Thanks, Dave. Lyndon, anyone else want to come in and mention anything else on this report?
No, thank you, Leader. Councillor Dunn has covered everything.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, colleagues? And Peter?
I'd just like to thank David for bringing this forward. I think it's an excellent report, and I think anything we can do, David, and I know you're passionate about this, anything we can do to improve the housing situation in Torvine, you know, we must be really grateful for. Well done. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah, this is entirely down to officers, and I should caveat it as well with it is overwhelmingly good news, but I mean the housing situation remains very tricky, very difficult. We have lost over a course of the past year temporary accommodation, so this will help expand that capacity that we've got, but I think it needs to be put on the record that we are still behind on the capacity of temporary accommodation because we've lost that capacity because private landlords who we were leasing temporary accommodation from are leaving us because we're unable to pay the market rates. They're able to get a higher rate from the market, and that is a big issue all across Wales. It's ultimately a UK government issue because they need to pay the local housing rates at a higher rate, but we have limited control over that. But in short, it will hopefully expand our provision and expand it in a much better way of working. But I need to make sure it's caveated with expectations that it isn't going to totally make up for the shortfall that we've lost in the private landlords that have left us.
Thank you, and yeah, thank you to you for your efforts on this, but also I know Leslie and Rachel have put a lot of work into this over the planning phase, and just welcome the Welsh Government investment and, as you say, the partnership with Melin. Everyone happy then to move to the recommendations that are at paragraph 8. That firstly, we approve the redevelopment of Pearl Assurance House into an accommodation support hub, and secondly, that we approve the progression of a procurement process to support the development of this project. Everyone in favour? That's carried. Thank you all. Item 10 then is the electronic document record management solution, which is a mouthful. Over to Sue to introduce this.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it may not sound the most exciting report, but strangely, I'm quite excited about this report as someone who has a passion for efficiency and hates wasting time looking for things. So you may wonder what that's got to do with this, but how information is stored and managed and accessed and found is of significant importance for Torfaen County Borough Council. And this report sets out the rationale for using SharePoint Online as our corporate electronic document and records management solution, the way in which we store and find and dispose of information. The report recommends a preferred supplier to ensure an effective rollout and migration of our data, and it proposes the use of general reserves to support this. A bit on the background, the project's been developed in partnership with Monmouthshire County Council, and I'd really like to commend the project team on the extensive work undertaken to date to scope those requirements and develop this recommended way forward. From a compliance perspective, the use of SharePoint Online will automate how we retain and dispose of information. The migration work then will identify and remove files that are considered duplicate, redundant, obsolete or trivial, all the dross on the system that we spend hours wading through trying to find what we're looking for. And this, of course, will reduce business risks and save considerable officer time. It's estimated that the removal of these files prior to migration will reduce the number of electronic documents we store by up to 70%, and I think that's pretty astonishing. This, coupled with the improvements that will be made to file structures, the ability to collaborate on documents as they're being developed, will all make it easier and quicker to work on, search and access information and insights. In line with our strategic ambitions, this approach will also support us in becoming more data-driven as information and insight becomes more easily accessible, and ensuring that we maximise the existing investment in Microsoft 365. I just want to say that in my own working life, I've experienced the implementation of SharePoint as a system, and I'm really pleased to note that there's a lot of importance being put on change management, and this is why the proposed appointment of this external migration specialist is so important. They, alongside our internal team, will play a key role in ensuring our staff are supported to adopt and embed the new ways of working that will be required. And having been through it, I can definitely tell you there will be new ways of working. And so it's really important to note that members and senior officers have to play an important role championing the use of SharePoint and setting a strong example of using it as we're advised. So that's just a marker for our role there. So I'll hand over now to James Vale, who will give us some more detail on the report and the way forward. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. As you've outlined, the purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval to utilise general reserves to support the implementation of SharePoint Online as our corporate electronic document and record management solution, or EDRMS, for moving forward. Subject to Cabinet approval, funding would be used to appoint an external migration and change management specialist and the internal resource required to successfully implement and embed the solution to deliver the benefits that Councillor Morgan has outlined. By way of background, so in recognition of the need to improve the way in which we manage our electronic documentation and the associated challenges that are outlined in section 3 of the report, the joint project team was established between Torfaen and Monmouthshire to identify an appropriate solution and, importantly, a proposal for implementation. So having identified SharePoint Online as the solution, the project team has been focused on how best to implement it, and following consideration of options, concluded that the external migration and change management specialist approach should be taken forward, given the scale and complexity of the project. So as per section 4 of the report, a procurement exercise was subsequently undertaken which identified a preferred supplier who will, subject to the approval of both cabinets, lead on data cleansing and migration tasks and work closely with the project team, staff and service areas generally to plan, design and implement. The preferred supplier demonstrated a comprehensive and proven approach to change management, which will ensure the project is delivered with the minimum impact on business as usual, will effectively support staff to adopt and embed the new ways of working in SharePoint Online, and importantly develop our knowledge and understanding of the solution. Section 6.1 of the report outlines the costs of appointing the external migration specialist and the internal post to support delivery and adoption. Just like to point out to members that the costs outlined are based on the project proceeding jointly with Monmouthshire County Council. Should either authority decide not to proceed, the procurement exercise would need to be revisited with costs anticipated to rise. Finally, section 6.2 of the report highlights the potential risks of proceeding to implementation without the support of a migration and change management specialist, and that's particularly in terms of rollout speed, cost uncertainty and overall viability. Members of the project team are in attendance this morning, and between us we're more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think that's a good comprehensive explanation of the system and the rationale behind it. Any questions, colleagues? No. If not, are we all happy to agree with the recommendations at paragraph 8 of the report? That's great, and thank you for the work on bringing this report to us. Item 11 then is the public participation strategy. If I hand over initially to Peter on this one.
Thank you, Leader. We've talked a lot today about engagement and participation, and I fully believe we've demonstrated how embedded it is in our organisational culture. We do have a legal duty to do this under the Local Government Election Act 2021 and the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act 2015. In very simple terms, the strategy is there to give people the right to have their say on council issues at the right time. I'm not going to say much more on that now. I'm going to hand over to Neil, who will perhaps give us a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Good morning, Cabinet. Unfortunately, my colleague Louise Day is unable this morning to present the report, but I must thank her and the small working group of officers, including Kath Cleaves, Katie Jenkins, Stephen Honeywell and Rhiannon Bennett, who have pulled together the report, the strategy and the framework for staff that sits behind this. So I'll aim to be brief. You'll have received the report and the digital version of our strategy, which links to best practice approaches for participation, including national principles for public engagement in Wales and the Children and Young People's National Participation Standards. Councillor Jones has outlined our approach to participation, which has been guided by the various legislative duties that he touched upon. The Local Government and Election Wales Act states local authorities should encourage people to participate in decision-making. The report before you today lays out the background, the issues and findings, the actions to follow a decision, and importantly, the consultation that has been undertaken internally and externally to seek a variety of stakeholders' views on our strategy. I would like to reassure you, and I think you have been reassured, that even without this strategy, the Council is already undertaking many successful public engagement campaigns, and participation is taking place nearly every day in one part of the Council or another. Today, you've already touched upon the British, the place plans, and the economy and skills strategy that have all had extensive engagement. We also have a new online participation platform called Get Involved. That's open 24/7, and we're lucky to have many active forums and groups in the borough who regularly get involved in our decisions. Just to give a very live example, over 1,000 people have so far given us their views on canal proposals. That public feedback will contribute to the subsequent action plan. So our strategy is deliberately succinct and very simply says, we will inform you, the public and stakeholders, of how and when you can engage with council services and the democratic process. We will provide a variety of different ways for you to have your say, and we will let you know your contributions have been used. We will continually review how we engage with residents to ensure our processes work for everyone. And for us, participation means enabling people to engage in processes where they determine their level of involvement. Their views are valued and informed decision-making, leading to effective strategic planning, service improvement and personal empowerment. And that is has been endorsed by the Torfaen Local Public Service Board. So, the purpose of the strategy and the framework is that we fulfil the requirements of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. Our staff are trained and supported to understand how to engage with stakeholders to ensure their effective participation. Our public participation follows best practice guidance. Stakeholders are fully informed of council activity where and when appropriate. We will ensure our stakeholders reflect the diversity of Torfaen. We will ensure the quality of engagement in all stages of the participation process. We will ensure voices of underrepresented groups are heard, and our staff are guided to overcome some perceptions and some barriers to participation. Our framework provides some simple flowcharts and planning documents that help identify the best approaches to use to undertake effective engagement. So just to reiterate, our strategy and framework will facilitate a better coordinated and consistent approach to public participation across the council, and it outlines what and why engagement activities will take place, what stakeholders should be involved, and when and how they should be engaged. Thank you, Cabinet. I'll finish there, and our recommendation today is to approve the strategy.
That's great. Thank you both. I've got a question around, obviously we talk about engagement, participation and communications, and I think we need to recognise those are different things. They're three separate words for a reason. How we ensure participation is very much linked with our community strategy and doing things with people rather than to them. How we communicate things, I think we've made great strides forward as a council in the last decade about communicating with people online in a way that is really engaging, but is about informing them of things that are useful to them about what we're doing and what's going on in the area. Engagement, I think, is an interesting sort of middle ground between the two, between participation and communications, how we get people involved in decisions before we take them, how we get their views known, and how we have a constructive debate as we're deciding on what to do. I guess my question is around underrepresented groups that you mentioned. Often the focus of our decision-making in councils is around very visible services, around the environment, around neighbourhood services. One of my concerns is underrepresented groups who may not be as able to carry placards or protest or get engaged online. For example, young people in the care system. How do we make sure that our resourcing choices take into account the views of those people, because they have the right to be heard as much as anyone else, but they maybe have less opportunity or ability to be heard? I guess it's how do we get that balance right between, yes, taking notice of the very visible services that people often have lots of views on, and maybe making sure that we shed a bit of light on some of the confidential services that council run, the personal services that council run that are very important to people.
Thank you, Leader. I think we're always looking for ways to identify and engage with underrepresented groups, and I think there's some really good examples of already young people. We've mentioned young people a few times today, the Youth Alliance, which is bringing together more young people into a forum. Also, disability access forums. We're frequently going to that group to check what we're doing and how we're involving people who, as you say, may have less or maybe less able to participate. And one really good example is using actual service users on groups that we know takes place. Corporate parenting is one that springs to mind immediately, where we have two young people on that group giving their views frequently on our approach to corporate parenting. So I think it's always evolving, and we're always looking to identify new groups that we can go out to and seek their views. And I think the succinct strategy in front of you is about always developing, always reflecting, and always helping our colleagues ensure they can go out and reach as many people as possible. And it will vary from activity to activity based on identifying the groups that should have a say.
Great. I guess the other side of that, I guess, is making sure that the voice of some service providers in some of those areas are told too. The stories of some of our staff who do great things in the community, but maybe whose work they're not able to trumpet it because it is by its nature confidential or sensitive. How we make sure we tell the story of those staff and what they do every day. I've got three other questions to come in. David, Peter, and then Sue.
I think the answer to your question, Leader, is so there's an example in there, Torvine Access Forum, which I'm so pleased is part of this consultation, part of this process now, really. The answer really for underrepresented groups is for us to help empower them to start their own forums, to start their own kind of collective, which is what's happened with the Accessibility Forum. So I think credit needs to be given to the Torvine officers who regularly attend that and have attended it from its conception. This Torvine Access Forum is basically it's a forum for people with all manner of disabilities to come together and talk about the impact of those disabilities on various aspects of life. So it's life experience driven, which I think is the most important thing. The difficult mic's gone off. There we are. The difficult thing is a chicken and egg situation. The difficult thing with underrepresented groups is that they're underrepresented from the beginning. So you have to really sort of initiate that kind of empowerment, which is I played a part in helping set up Torvine Access Forum for young care leavers. I think there's an element. We've got Torvine officers who work directly with them. I think there's a case for them empowering them to set up their own forum, because essentially in the formation of everything we do as a council, services that we provide, policy that we shape, we're doing so within our own life experiences. And I'm very conscious that there are so many life experiences that I have no authority over. I can't speak for people with all manner of disabilities, and this is why it's so important for these advocacy groups to form and to be part of this process, because if you can only think within your own life experience, you're going to miss all manner of going on, which is why we have all manner of poor examples of public infrastructure and businesses not catering for people with disabilities and whatnot. So I'm really pleased that, sorry, it's a bit long, but that Torvine Access Forum is part of this. And the answer to your question, Leader, is for our officers who are already doing a fantastic job to help empower those underrepresented groups to start their own forums up and to be part of this process.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to add, really picking up on what David was saying about whatever we do, we have to embed accessibility in our engagement processes. And just looking at the report, we've got something in there about an easy read accessibility version will be produced. We should be doing more of that every time we consult on anything. Easy read is great for people with learning disabilities, but we've got to think about the wide range of disadvantaged groups and how we can help. I mean, if we can engage with our most vulnerable citizens, we'll improve things for everyone.
Thank you, Leader. Is it fair to say that we're getting pretty good at informing and consulting, and there's been big improvement there, but looking at the model of participation, I'm really interested in how we move into empowering and then co-producing with our communities. And this is one, I think, which is going to involve whole council involvement, because this isn't just a comms team function. This is very much how we work and how we operate, and particularly in Dave Leach's purview around working with our communities. So I'm really keen to see what the proposals will be as we move forward for empowering our communities to take responsibility and making decisions, managing resources, or even delivering services, as the model says, and then even moving on to co-producing right from scratch, working with our communities and groups to design new services and to deliver them. So I think it's a really exciting model. I'd really love to see the emphasis on empower and co-produce as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Just to add in there, we recently had a Future Torfaen event where we had some fantastic case studies of exactly where that's happening, of empowering local stakeholders. The case study we had was around the boating lake, and it really did show how service users who had been previously just receiving a service from the council and now running the service and making a better job of it, and making it better for other users to then use the facility. So how we share those stories is something that we're doing. Chief Executive refers to it as working out loud, and we're doing that frequently internally to demonstrate how we will be working more and more going forward.
Right, okay. And colleagues, if everyone's happy then, if we move to the recommendations, they're at paragraph 8. Is everyone happy to approve the participation strategy? That's carried, and thank you for your work on this, everyone. Okay, before we move to agenda item 12, which is exclusion of the press and public, I should have mentioned the economy skills strategy will go to council on October the 25th. The dates were changed because of the mourning period for Her Majesty the Queen. So that will be October the 25th, council, which is next Tuesday. So thank you to everyone involved in that one. So item 12 is the exclusion of press and public. If I read out the statement, it's to agree the exclusion of press and public for the meeting as the report is not for publication because in accordance with paragraph 14 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, it contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, and the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed, colleagues? Okay, so if we go into to private session.